You win, but you lose because you destroy the company and you destroy your investment at the same time. So adapting global best practices to local laws, using best practices for diligence and management of companies. A common theme I see when there are new venture funds in countries that are getting into the venture game is the investors come out of investment banking, traditional banking. They don't understand venture whatsoever, so they apply the incorrect metrics and management styles to the companies and essentially destroy the entire portfolio. So if you want to build a culture of investing, you need to have venture funds that understand global best practices that have evolved over 40 years in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, because they're best practices for a reason. IPO markets, let me skip to that one. I was on a program about 10 years ago in Poland where they were talking about a new stock exchange specifically for startups. It was like London AIM but light, or the NASDAQ without much regulation. And I thought, wow, you're going to let companies raise public money with little oversight. What could go wrong? Well, I was wrong. That is one of the best performing markets anywhere in the world, bar none. And other countries, including Mexico, is looking at a new bolsa, or stock exchange, focused on technology companies, both because of the difficulty of raising later stage capital and the lack of capacity to exit. So again, it may look like you're starting at the end of the process, but if there's nowhere for your companies to go to get an exit, the culture of investment doesn't work because you have to get the money out. Okay, actually the last one I want to talk about too. Governments actually are very helpful when they require purchasing from startups, or they have programs to encourage that. One of the mythologies in the United States is startups are these rough, rugged individual companies that are far away from the government. And people in Silicon Valley encourage this myth. You know, there's a Chinese phrase, the wall is high and the emperor is far away. That's the way we allegedly look at Washington, D.C. That's nonsense. Silicon Valley exists because there were trillions of dollars of spending, primarily defense spending, but not exclusively, over those years. The semiconductor industry, all sorts of industries, were seeded and made possible by investment into academic institutions, by military contract purchases. Now, it skews what your investment goes into, but government purchasing and investment policy does factually influence and help create the environment, and that can't be ignored. That doesn't mean it's always efficient, but it does matter. Trade, foreign investment policies. It is actually important, in my view, to encourage foreign venture investors to participate in your economy. We bring best practices. I'm on lots of boards, whether it's Indonesia or Argentina or Mexico, with local investors who are new to the venture game. And we do what they must consider crazy things. They don't understand why we compensate the CEO the way we do, or why we give stock to the mid-level management. Why would you do that? But the interaction, the discussions that we have, using their local knowledge and our global knowledge, are helping stimulate the community. So making it easy to get money in and out, eliminating regulatory and legal uncertainty actually is crucial. And we need to encourage, I would suggest, making it easy for international technology companies to hire and utilize not just local talent, but international talent. And I've based it on lots of feedback I've received from companies actually doing business in the kingdom or considering it. But let's save that for another time, because we have just a minute or two left. You want to encourage foreign M&A and foreign IPOs, the returnees, and I've emphasized the returnees because both China, Taiwan, I guess India, that was a crucial ingredient. The people that worked in Google and Apple and Facebook and came back and formed companies where they knew the way things work, they knew the systems and the processes. You have an enormous amount of talent from the kingdom all over the world in Silicon Valley, and frankly, most of them don't want to come back and start companies here. I hope that's starting to change.
What is really very fruitful and educational presentation. We will have just a few questions, and then we'll go to the next session. So please, any questions? Questions, please.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned Saudis working in Silicon Valley and that they don't want to come back to Saudi to do business in here. So they started their businesses off in Silicon Valley, or they moved there to their businesses. Do you have more information about this?
Yeah, it's okay.
Usually I just shout to the whole room with a voice. The question is about, and it's not just Saudis, there's people from the entire MENA region in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a very high per capita PhD rate, a lot of advanced education, especially in the sciences. So you see a lot of people from the region of venture capital, technology companies, sometimes the CEOs, often as middle-level managers, CTOs, VPs of product design, development, engineering. And I don't know if there's a universal theme, but I did speak with as many people as I could in anticipation of this. And many of them came to the US for school and maybe never went back. Or they decided the opportunity was to form a company in the United States, and maybe eventually they could do something elsewhere. I talked to the gentleman who's actually sitting in France and is running a company actually in your region, but it's not based here. Although he is Saudi, he just decided it was too difficult to do business. Doesn't mean there aren't local Saudi entrepreneurs, but I'm not saying anything people don't know in this room, but there are lots of reasons why people who have connections to the region don't choose to base their startups here. And if you talk to 100 people, there may be 57 different reasons, some of which will overlap. But it's just a very complicated dynamic. Sometimes it's their wives don't want to live here. Sometimes because of restrictions on women. Sometimes it's they don't believe the opportunities exist. But the returnees are hugely crucial in what other countries have been able to do to jumpstart their ecosystems. Because they have all the networks back in the US and Europe. And those turn out to be crucial. If nothing else, it's for the acquisitions. Because if you need to be acquired by eBay or Cadence or Siemens and they used to work there, it's a lot easier to make that deal happen.
Hello, this is Mohammed Al-Khamis from Kingsford University. This is really a good presentation. It's very compressed. We really need more to understand. But I have a notice about, I want you to elaborate on the difference between the culture and the ecosystem. And how you look at our culture and our ecosystem in Saudi Arabia as an expert. Okay.
So culture and ecosystem, and part of that comes from, I use the terms a little too loosely and interchangeably when they in fact are distinct as you're pointing out. So maybe break them apart for a second. There's culture that we understand. There's startup culture. And there's a sort of ecosystem, which is a constellation of individual persons. Sometimes institutions, but people matter more than institutions. That's one role of entrepreneurship. And each of those people has both their base culture, the way we understand culture, and their understanding of startup culture. So it's a whole mess. But what I will say is the best entrepreneurship environments are those that, first of all, where the base culture that we come from accepts opportunity taking or risk taking, it can accept failure, it can accept cooperation and trust. Because you have to trust an investor, you have to trust other co-founders, trust engineers, because when you have proprietary new technology, one of the most difficult things to do is open up and trust. But that's also the most important thing to get a company going, is having co-founders and other people involved. So there's base culture things. And some of that's just having examples of successes, because there are places where entrepreneurship has taken off that I never thought it would or wouldn't for 20 years, because 2 or 3 companies made it happen, had acquisitions, made it successful, and became role models for the young. So they went from places where the best and brightest wanted to work for multinationals and large state enterprises to working at startups. So that's one shift. When I talk about the culture and the ecosystem of startups, it's about making people who have different pieces of the puzzle want to work and be connected to each other. And I wish I could give you the specifics of a government policy that would just do that, because that's actually among the most important things. I didn't mention it in the interest of time, but one of the transformations I think is important is that investors themselves need to become those connectors, where they have networks of people who have expertise on channel strategies and how to deal with enterprise sales and working in the semiconductor industry and how to do clean tech startups. Mergers and acquisitions, patent strategies, all the kinds of expertise that we take for granted where I'm from.
Because the primary determinant of whether a company is ultimately successful is building that network quickly. You know, there are examples where, you know, the best search engine technology wasn't Google, it was two scientists from the University of Kansas who didn't have access to any of those things. And although they had a better technology, Google raised money from the best VCs in the Valley, and the rest is history. So there's lots of things that analytically are separate, but what I want to argue to this room is you need to bring the whole global network, the local network, the regional networks throughout the entire MENA region to bear in each of your companies to give them the maximum chance of success. And that's easy to do on one hand because individuals can make it happen, but it's the hardest thing to do because most people don't even know what they're missing.
Any other questions, please? Any other questions? Mike, please, over there.
Good morning. I just have a quick question. From your experience, have you noticed a difference in female entrepreneurship growth, from a growth point of view, from a success factor, or from attracting international funding?
Globally or in this region?
Both, actually.
Okay. All right, so the clarifying question I asked was global or specific to this region. Let me talk globally for a moment. One of the interesting trends that we've seen internationally, because we spend a lot of time throughout the world, so I see deals from South Africa, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, otherwise Latin America. None of these cultures are what we would, if I can use this term, none of them are feminist cultures where women have anywhere political equality. However, in most of those regions, we see extraordinary women entrepreneurs, not just at the CEO level, but the chief technology officer, operating officer, engineering, senior engineering positions. So the most important and crucial technology and leadership positions are often in the hands of women. The best explanation I have for that, because I've spoken with many of them, we look at them. I mean, Richmond historically has been incredible when it comes to women-led businesses. Some of the biggest exits in the financial sector of women-owned businesses are our investments. So it's a pride point for us. And what all of them has is a very similar story, which is I was in a bank or a major corporate environment and I had nowhere to go. There were barriers in my advancement, but in a startup, no one can tell me no because I'm the boss. You know, my merit, my ability to create, to imagine, to innovate, to sell products is all that determines it. Now, it's not that simple because you still have to get capital and have people buy from you, and sometimes being a woman makes that more difficult. But it's more of a meritocracy than working at a 100-year-old company that's well entrenched and has very elaborate gender-based expectations. In the region, I have seen very few women entrepreneurs focused in this kingdom. But I have seen women entrepreneurs from other countries, such as Lebanon, Egypt, a number that have businesses that also sell in the country, but they're based elsewhere, like Bahrain. So it's starting, and we do a lot of investing in Indonesia. I sit on a board in Indonesia, and I will tell you, they have some incredible women entrepreneurs there, focused on businesses that are everything from how do you make Sharia-compliant clothing, which has been trendy, how do you create new business models for women's small enterprises to gain access to international markets, and just more traditional technology businesses because they're electrical engineers and they're very, very good. So it is happening, and I don't believe anything is purely a meritocracy, but I do believe, and I say this with no hint of irony, that entrepreneurship and innovation is the most merit-based system in the world when capital exists. Because no matter who you are, your religion, your skin color, your age, you have the capacity to create, to imagine, to dream, and make it happen. And by the way, when I say age, the discrimination there is usually we have a cult of the youth. We have the idea that 18-year-old kids know everything. They don't. Our best entrepreneurs are in their 40s and 50s. And in fact, we don't invest in people below 30, typically. So we want the best ideas, I don't care where they come from. And often those ideas are the people that everyone else is ignoring. That's our opportunity.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm really interested to know how can we expose the incubators and accelerators to be internationally exposed. It's actually sometimes you concentrate on the competitive advantage of the city or the region, but it's how can we just commercialize it and market it all over? So it's going to be easier for entrepreneurs to think globally instead of thinking regionally. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's actually two questions embedded. Let me take them backwards. That point I skipped over because I only gave myself 28 minutes was born global startups. So one of the failures of global accelerator and incubator policy has been to focus companies on just purely local domestic opportunities. And that's not universally the case, but a lot of national policy of clustering and incubation is about local domestic economic development solely, to the point where companies aren't thinking of global markets. For those who saw my presentation yesterday, I'm a fanatic and a firm believer that companies that are born global, that from the moment of their inception are thinking and acting and presuming to execute globally in international markets will always outperform companies that don't. It doesn't mean you go international day one because you'll die trying to do too much at once, but your company is built with an international focus from the moment of inception. That's always your goal. So one is just to instill in any incubator or accelerator situation that attitude as a condition. The second point is about incubators. I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but we've never invested in a company out of an incubator, and probably never will. I won't say never, because companies come from wherever, but most VCs view accelerators and incubators as damaged goods. Like they're the companies that couldn't find money elsewhere. And again, that sounds like a harsh statement, but it's a reality. There are great companies that have come out of Y Combinator and others, so it's not universally true, but the belief is if you were that good, you wouldn't have gone to an incubator or accelerator. So what I've argued in the past when I talk to people at international development agencies promoting incubators and accelerators is they need to actually add value, not just real estate and a ping pong table and some Wi-Fi, because that doesn't matter. What matters is, let's give you an example of one that I think works. So there's an NFC, or Near Field Communication Incubator in Dallas, which is where a lot of Nortel's old engineers are working. There's a fintech one in New York. Those accelerators, I think, are successful because they bring people with expertise and knowledge to a subject area. People with, experts in the field, leaders of the field, that when you come in, they give you extended networks, similar to what a good VC does. Here's people who come to build financial models, intellectual property strategies, marketing strategies, channel management, working with existing large companies like Cisco or whoever it is, depending on what you're in. So the accelerator incubator isn't just come, sit in a queue. It's we're going to train you at a high level how to be the best startup possible, and give you international networks and access to the systems, and teach you how to think like the companies that ultimately can be those billion-dollar exits. And some do it, but most don't. Most of them are just real estate plays. Again, I don't know if this sounds callous, but most don't do any of the education necessary to truly train the entrepreneurs to be extraordinary. And that's the opportunity, by the way, because whenever you hear a problem, the first thing an entrepreneur hears is, what's my opportunity to solve it? So with the deficiency comes the opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mr. Dave. I want to ask. Your concept and your rules that you applicable in your country or in your environment, do you think it will work or succeed in our different environment, like in Saudi Arabia or in Middle East? Like now I'm in China for 3 years, and they go and study in Oxford and Harvard, went back to China, and they make new rules like the same things in West environment. So you have, like now we have a new environment. This concept that you explained to us, do you think it will succeed? Or how much do you think it will succeed by percent? Thank you.
Well, let me make sure I understand what you're asking. There's two questions. One is, how much can sort of the Silicon Valley model be exported to the region? And the second is predicting the likelihood of success. Is those 2 points? I just want to make sure I got the question. I start with two contradictory premises about adaptation of Silicon Valley practices. On the one hand, I think what we do generally makes a lot of sense And in most cases, it's the optimized version of how to approach startups. Not always. There are things I think we do that's dumb, but for the most part, we get it right. But there's always the need to localize and adapt. Some of it is simply legal optimization. Some countries, for example, don't have boards but have shareholder structures. So some of it's just adaptation to legal and regulatory regimes. Some of it's cultural adaptation. But what I will tell you is over all of the years of watching this in every region of the world, the base elements, the balance between the investor and the entrepreneur, between the markets and the startups, the larger companies and smaller companies, government policy and free market, those things all tend to end in an equilibrium someplace that makes sense. If this were a conference 20 years ago, people would have been up here telling you that without political freedom, there could be no innovation. Well, China's somewhat disproven that, although it's complicated. People always have their own agenda of what works and what doesn't, but in every environment, whether it's Africa, Latin America, Asia, the US, Europe, the things I've talked about are always present in some fashion to a greater or lesser degree. And it's just a question of how much more. So to answer your second question about how successful, I think the target's like 25% by 2030. I don't know if I have enough information to know that because I would be opining on political events I can't. But what I will tell you is the educational talent, the wealth, the resources, the network and infrastructure, all the base building blocks are here. And I will also tell you that for companies that are in the region, and I'm just primarily focused on the Endeavor networks, those are who I speak to, everyone wants to be in this market. There are a lot of great companies, whether it's logistics, payment systems, that are coming into this market. A lot of mobile-based companies, a lot of the companies for the underbanked, there's a lot out there. And more would be here if it were easier for them to do business here. So the opportunity is huge, and it's not that difficult to grab it. It's, I would just say just listen to the entrepreneurs, because they're the ones doing it. They can tell you what they need, because they're there.
Mr. David, you mentioned in your presentation when you talked about the ecosystem that the pricing of any startup and any transaction is affected by the rules and regulation of a particular country. How is that, and can you give us an example?
Sure. So this is our calculation when we make an investment. We're really no different than anyone. I have to risk, by the way, our minimum check size is $3 million. So 3 to 5 is the minimum we would do for a deal. To justify the time and the risk, we have to be able to argue to ourselves and to our investors, who are fairly hardcore, why we have a chance to return the entire fund off one deal. And depending upon the percent ownership, that's either a $500 million or $1 billion exit. Now that doesn't mean, in fact, that does occur in every case, but we have to have an expected value overlay which is high in order to take the risk in the first place. So the more headwinds there are in the capacity to operate, so for example, give real examples based on conversations with entrepreneurs, including one we almost invested in, who is active in this country. When we looked at his books and records, to operate here, he had to essentially double hire. He had to hire a local Saudi, then a foreign national to actually do the work, and then someone else to comply with regulatory requirements. It took him 6 months to get set up. There were issues getting money in and out of the country. So that doesn't mean we wouldn't do the deal, but every little thing that makes it harder is both the barrier to doing it, and we have to price risk differently. Is there political risk? Is there currency fluctuation risk? And currency fluctuation is not typically a problem here, but say Latin America, you look at Brazil with their inflation rate, or Mexico, what happened to the peso after the last presidential election in the US really had a harmful effect on a number of our investments down there. And that's a big space for us because the Mexican government is an investor. So when we look at how we price the deals, do we want to do the deal, and then how much do we have to take to make it work? And if you start to take too much, like we're taking 40% instead of 25%, it starts to be less interesting because the entrepreneurs will quit, won't be motivated, they won't have the upside. And so we would just tend to pass. But it affects both pricing and willingness. And I wish I could give you an exact formula, but there isn't. But, you know, there's extreme examples like South Africa. I would never invest in a company incorporated there. Now, I would invest in a South African deal if it were in the British Virgin Islands and had a subsidiary and the IP roamed offshore. But those, you know, when people are starting to have those discussions, you know you're in trouble. Investors should never have to worry about anything other than getting the entrepreneurs their money and going. If you're spending more than a month on structuring, there's a problem.
I would like to thank everybody for coming, and also I'll ask the speakers for the next session to come over, which will be the importance of human capital and development of entrepreneurship, education and university. Dr. Laylak, Professor Laylak Savadi will be the chair for this, and she will introduce the other speaker while she is managing this session. Dr. Laylak, please.